Good morrow to you all. You have fallen on barred times.
Brought to you by RHUL Shakespeare Society.
You've joined me, Cassie Dixon.
And me, Jack Hardman, as we bear some bardy truths. Hello everyone and welcome back to Barred Times. This is your host Jack Hardman, and with me today are the wonderful Reuben and Matteo. Say hi guys.
Hello.
Hello.
So, I have these wonderful men on for to talk today about the shows that they are going to be involved in. So, here we have Reuben talking about Savoy Opera Society's show this term, Patience. And I also have Matteo on talking about his play with, he's MDing called Amelior with Rucker's Theatre Company. So, both of you. You are obviously both involved in music. You are both MDs on the shows that you are currently involved in. You both study music, or have studied, in your case, Reuben. And yeah, obviously music is an incredibly wide topic. And I suppose I have to ask you both, is there any particular applications of music, be it video games, film, theatre, opera, anything like that, that kind of really gets you going and really you vibed with straight away, you clicked with straight away?
I think for me, it's probably the biggest one for me is film music. Obviously to an extent, I really love musical theatre, really love opera, really love video game music, TV music, all the rest of music for incidental music for theatre and stuff. But the one for me I think is got to be film music. It just a lot of the time when done really well, it just can go so nicely hand in hand with the narrative, yeah. I don't know. There's just something quite magical about that.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree more. The whole thing with film, I think there's I think the perfect example, and I gush about this film all the time because it's one of my favorite films. But The Social Network, by David Fincher and Aaron Sorkin. The music that goes with that is so perfectly, it sets the tone for all the different stages of that film so well. Just shows how that can be so unbelievably effective in different situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned film music, because I think definitely for me, definitely growing up, I think that was a big part of what got me into it in general. I think just sort of how it would, because I watched a lot of films and a lot of TV when I was younger.
Yeah.
And it was just how the music would stick with me, particularly in how, like said Matteo, in sort of how it can help sort of hammer home the emotional response that the film is trying to convey. And in general, I think particularly nowadays, it's music that gets an emotional response out of me and can tell a story, which is a big part of the reason why I love musical theatre, for instance. And it's not just what's being conveyed in the vocals, but also what's going on underneath and sort of the little details underneath all that, and sort of how they convey sort of, like I said, those small details about the story as well, especially because music, it's such a unique, universal language that anybody can really kind of understand, and nothing does it quite like music.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's funny you bring up musical theatre, because there's firstly something that we are all involved in or have been involved in at some point. We're big musical boys.
Indeed.
And one of my favourite shows at the moment is Hamilton, which I know is not a hot take. It's a very by the way, I'm a big fan of cheese sometimes as well. I think Hamilton is a really good example of something that uses, or something like Les Mis, again, not a hot take. No matter where I am, who I'm with, how many times I've listened to it, It's Quiet Uptown will make me cry. There is no control I have over that, and it's just because of the music, and the music being so unbelievably powerful, especially when accompanied with the story.
In terms of motif like that, Hamilton, and even just general concept, Hamilton is such, as a show, is just so, has been put together so carefully.
Yeah.
In terms of that use of motif, where again, I'm saying that is really big in film music, and is kind of slightly less so nowadays than in the early days of film, and it kind of stole it from Wagner and opera.
Yeah.
Of using like loads of motifs, and it happens a little bit less so nowadays in film, but Hamilton really does that a lot. It also does a really nice thing what you were saying before about sort of like the overall concept. Like with Hamilton, it does a really nice thing of everything about the show is like conceptually consistent,
Sure.
which I think is why it's such a satisfying show to watch. Is like the music and the set and the costume and the direction and the performances and everything just feels like it belongs together because it all kind of matches stylistically.
Yeah.
Which I think is like always the goal when you're putting on a show.
Yeah.
Is to make sure it all kind of lines up like in that kind of satisfying way.
A massive part of this is just going to end up just us talking about Hamilton, which, don't get me wrong, I would absolutely adore. I love it. But the whole thing about the show, about how basically ambition changes as you age, that kind of being one of the central themes of the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how the music then matches that, and how the musical style starts with like, oh, we're doing some like really fast hip hop. We're doing some like very kind of upbeat, staccato, powerful like. Is it Guns and Ships?
Yeah.
Like, or like My Shot or something like that. And then we go into like, as he ages, it all slows down, and we see his son a little bit, and he is again like. But
yeah, it is really interesting. I like kind of like echo what you said, Jack. Like we will move on from Hamilton, but it does something really interesting. There's a very very small like kind of like behind the scenes kind of documentary thing about that Lin-Manuel Miranda and Alex Lacamoire, and I can't remember off the top of my head the director of Hamilton, shame on me. Yeah, but basically the mainly the musical director and orchestrator Alex Lacamoire with Lin-Manuel Miranda talking about how they developed the characterization and the difference in characterization between Burr and Hamilton in the way that they presented them, because obviously throughout the entire show Hamilton actually does very little. Well, I say little. Does less singing and more rapping.
Yeah.
And Bird does almost no rapping at all, which is a really interesting way of presenting the two men of kind of Hamilton being like spurring off the mouth and like trying to like big himself up and being, like you said, like big energy, like even kind of later on still being like that force, and Bird being this character who's like, no, I'm going to take my time and try and weigh everything out, and so he sings. He doesn't rap. He doesn't try and spit all the words out. He's just like, no, I'm going to let and see what happens. Really, really interesting.
They are just as characters. They are staccato and legato like in body. Man, amazing. Let's talk about something else. But also, actually, on a slightly the same topic, Star Wars. Like, there's like something that uses motifs all the time.
I mean, that's John Williams' kind of forte. I mean, he does it in all his films.
Worship John Williams.
Yes, exactly. Matteo.
Pray to him.
Praise him.
Praise him.
But he is genuinely just a god at this type of stuff, though, because he really kind of makes the music its own character. Like not just in Star Wars, but also like Jaws as well. Like, you know, when you have that just that two-note mode. It's literally two notes.
Two of the most powerful notes in the entirety of the film. Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. I don't know if any of you have seen it, but you can find like clips on YouTube of Jaws, the scene where they first encounter the shark without the music.
Yeah.
And it's just people looking at the ocean. Yeah. And it's the most boring thing on the planet, because it's just a couple people looking slightly panicked and then clips of the ocean, and so there's just nothing to it. But then obviously you put the iconic themes and stuff over it, and it completely transforms it.
That's exactly it. And you know, that saved them a lot of trouble, because, you know, I think they wanted to show the shark itself a lot more, but because of big technical difficulties, they kind of had to rely on the music in a way, but it just makes it so much more effective.
I think it's this is basically us just being fans of music. Man,
it's a really, really similar story actually with Bernard Herrmann in Psycho, because he originally didn't want a score at all. What's his name? Hitchcock didn't want a score at all when he was originally filming it, and Bernard Herrmann came up to him and was like,
hold my beer.
Literally. And so he wrote the really famous, you know, shower scene, and then Hitchcock was like, apparently a director who very, very rarely changed his mind. was immediately kind of went, oh, you're right. Oh God, you're right. And he put that score in, and that really transforms that film as well.
Okay, well, amazing. So when did you guys realize that kind of music was something that you really wanted to get into and study and kind of engage in?
I think for me, there wasn't really like a specific moment where I was kind of like that. I think it was kind of a lot of just factors which kind of fed into it. So I think a big thing is the fact that I come from a very musical family. My mum works as a violin and piano teacher at a prep school. Literally, her and my dad met while they were playing in an orchestra. They were doing Tchaikovsky's Romeo and Juliet, which I know. And yeah, like my brother and my sister, they're both really into their music. Like they always go to big music festivals, or at least they would in normal times.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think music was kind of all around me during my upbringing. And I think also what was kind of a part of it was kind of a big part of my prep school as well. And there were a lot of I kind of felt like a lot of other stuff at school I wasn't very good at, like sport especially. My school was very sporty. It felt like everybody in my year was good at sport except me. So music in a way was kind of a thing I found I could, like when we were having music lessons, it was one of those things I found I could kind of latch onto, and I found myself being quite knowledgeable about it, and I was like, oh, I can actually get down with this. And yeah, I think it was kind of there where I realized, music, it's not just a thing you just kind of have on in the background. It really can be a passion and a dream that you can follow.
So we've heard Reuben kind of just being born into it, and also through school. What about you?
I kind of had almost the exact opposite. So I'm not from a musical family at all. No one else in my family plays an instrument. None of them particularly sing. None of them are remotely musical in that sense. When I was maybe about 7 or 8, I started taking guitar lessons just because I wanted to learn.
Sure.
And then when I came here, the school that I came to here was really, really quite a highly musical school. Really the closest thing you could come to being like a specialist school without actually being a specialist school.
Sure.
Music was definitely our thing. And so kind of through that, I kind of just fell into it. And so I started, I say against my will, not even, kind of like fell into playing brass.
Sure.
Kind of literally just fell into it. And then from there, kept playing, then kind of picked it kind of by a fluke, because I wasn't going to pick it for GCSEs, and then it was I wanted to do separate sciences and it wasn't in the same block, so I had to pick something else and do dual, and so I did music, and then I really, really loved it, and then picked it for A-level.
You went to a music specialist school and you weren't going to pick music?
Well, because we didn't go for that reason.
Oh right, okay.
It wasn't like an actual special school. It's just that its thing was music.
I was a little confused there. I'm
it's
back
just
on board. I'm back on board.
The schools where it really excelled was music, and
sure.
So I almost didn't take it, then took it for GCSE and really loved it, then really kind of like threw myself into it, and then kind of bit by bit basically decided to come to do it at uni and want to pursue it afterwards, which is a bit like a mad stroke of luck, but yeah.
I completely feel you. Some of the big thing, and well, I was going to say my friends will know this. Anyone who has met me in the past 6 months will know this. D&D is something that I have fallen into.
Always comes back to D&D.
It always comes back to... Reuben lives with me, so he has to put up with a lot of this. But it's something I fell into accidentally, and I now hopefully want to kind of pursue that outside of like just a hobby. And so if that is possible, but so I totally get like the whole I just kind of started doing it because why not, and then oh my god, I love this. What I was never meant to love this. What's going on? Reuben,
hello.
You are currently working on Savoy Opera Society's production of Patience, and I was wondering if you could share us any insights into the kind of the concept, the setting, the themes, anything like that.
Yeah, of course. So, Patience, so it's obviously a comic operetta written by Gilbert and Sullivan. And sort of the whole idea with the original show is that it's satirizing the aesthetic movement within the arts throughout the late Victorian period. For people who don't know, aestheticism is basically to do with the idea that art should be beautiful over having like a deep moral or deep message behind it. And it's also sort of had a stronger focus on self-expression rather than sort of conforming to like traditional modernist values and that sort of stuff. So with our particular version, the original story is set in like a medieval castle. We've moved ours to a 1970s university setting. And I think, because obviously we wanted to move it to a more modern setting that a contemporary audience would more easily sort of be able to recognise. And particularly because this whole idea of, postmodernism versus aestheticism, it's still present even to this day. And we felt particularly sort of the 1970s was a particularly sort of interesting period to look at in that sense, because again, a lot of musical artists, especially, they were very much sort of, they all had a very strong aesthetic, which they really kind of showcased, and we kind of have that in our productions. Like, for example, Bunthorne, who's one of the main characters, and he's like an aesthetic poet. He's going to be modelled on Elton John and character names. I should know this. Grosvenor.
Perhaps.
Yes, it would be helpful, wouldn't it? Grosvenor is going to be modelled on David Bowie, that sort of thing. And particularly sort of the university setting we thought would be appropriate again, because it's sort of a setting which a modern audience would more easily get on board with, but also because a lot of the aspects of the story can really kind of relate to a university setting, because it's a lot about characters sort of constantly reinventing themselves again in order to sort of please the masses. It's like, for example, the chorus of the maidens and the dragoons, who are in our version are like these scholars. The dragoons especially are constantly sort of because the maidens are constantly falling in love with different characters. At one point they're in love with Bunthorne, at one point they're in love with Grosvenor. So the dragoons are constantly changing their aesthetic in order to try and match with what the maidens
so almost
for.
like the just swathes of adoring fans of like, oh my god, Justin Bieber, oh my god, One Direction, oh my god, whatever's currently having K-pop, I think, perhaps. I don't know what's hip. We can put that on the record. Amazing. That's really cool. So the whole aestheticism thing, that's really interesting. It's like the opposite of there was something a while ago now, I think about a year ago, maybe a year and a bit ago, where Banksy did this thing where a piece of his art sold, and then after it was sold, it then got shredded. And it's kind of like the complete opposite of that. It's like, well, who gives a monkeys about what this looks like? It's about what it represents that matters. It's almost, do you know what's really interesting though? It's like stuff like that has kind of been blooming a lot recently, which is a complete divergence to the modern kind of thinking of social media. Let's pop up the most amount of everything that we can, and look at how pretty I am, and look, I'm gonna pose in this position, and I'm gonna put, and there's whole things about like how to pose in order to kind of make yourself seem almost like this kind of Barbie doll, Ken doll kind of whatever doll you want to be, like representation of yourself. Fascinating. I think also about the whole reinventing yourself and setting it in a university. I don't know. Certainly I felt like when I came to, I don't know. Interrupt me if you disagree, but I certainly felt like when I came to uni, I I was like, I'm gonna be so different to how I was at home. I'm gonna have my hair cut in a different way.
Yeah.
I'm gonna start acting more like, I'm gonna be slightly less. I think a large one was, I was like, I'm gonna be less camp. That was one of my well, that how successful that was. I've done what? How many shows with MTS?
Only 2.
Yeah.
Only
Oh my god, yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So, obviously, we are not just here to promote the show of Reuben Havelock. We are also here to promote Amelior. Did I say that right?
That's
amazing. With Matteo. So, give us same question to you. Can you give us some kind of insights into the setting, into the themes, into the concepts?
Yeah, absolutely. So basically, it's a brand new show that we're in the process of sort of like writing and putting on for Camden Fringe this year, and it basically follows the story in a brief period of the lead character's life. The lead character called Amelia, and it aims to put the voice of the black queer female voice into kind of the centre, in a way that obviously musical theatre hasn't tended to do so in years gone by. And so it basically follows the story of the lead character in her handling of relationships, both romantic and sort of familial, also her interaction with the representation of her mental health and sort of medication, and how that can kind of like all spiral out of control, with kind of leaving the kind of ending message of the closest thing that to a happy ending that people can kind of reasonably expect in a modern age. Like, I think a lot of the time musicals can either have the being super depressing at the end or super optimistic at the end. Sure. And I think this does a really good job of trying to find a middle ground of essentially like a message of improvement, message of constantly trying to like work on oneself.
Yeah, just get, like, as long as you don't need to be perfect, but as long as you're one step further than you were yesterday, then you're winning.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like
exactly.
kind of like Dear Evan Hansen. Like
that kind of message at the end.
Yeah, where it's like, yeah, you were not great here, but you're slightly better now, and that's okay.
Kind of, at least for me, I think a really, really another vital kind of message of that, particularly nowadays with COVID and things, of kind of the ever changing kind of circumstances we found ourselves in, is that the ability to figure things out. Yeah. Instead of trying to be like, this is what's going to happen. Like, like I've done this, and so this is going to happen next. Yeah. Instead being like, I've done this, and this is where I want to go, but how exactly that happens will depend on how I get there.
Kind of challenging expectation versus reality.
Exactly. Yeah.
That honestly sounds amazing. I cannot wait to see it. Yeah. I cannot wait to see it. You have to push tickets on me when.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take the chance to plug right now. Camden Fringe, upstairs at the Gatehouse, 2nd to the 6th of August.
Amazing.
Tickets are on sale.
God. Ooh. Okay. We'll figure something out soon. Amazing. So okay, I'm really excited. So on to the next question. Both of you. We're talking about doing stuff over Zoom and kind of the trials and tribulations of dealing with Zoom. What do you think are the main drawbacks of doing rehearsals over Zoom and doing rehearsals kind of remotely? And are there any benefits? And do you think that those benefits might mean that there are some rehearsals done this way in the future?
I think definitely as a whole, so the main drawback is you just don't. I mean, this kind of goes for any kind of virtual rehearsal, whether it's directing, choreographing, is that you just don't get that same amount of feedback. It's just not the same as being in the rehearsal room. It's not as immediate being able to tell how your cast are doing in terms of picking it up. And I think definitely the main thing that I miss with virtual rehearsing is you're not able to immediately listen to the cast and sort of hear whether they're picking it up and hear how it all sounds together until you get to the final recording, which is always, a big shame. I think particularly for the cast, because part of the magic is, being on the stage with everybody else and, being able to listen and feel like you're really blending in to create this big sound. And, at the end of the day with virtual shows, at the end of the day when you're recording, all you're doing is you just have a track going through your ear, you're in your room and you're just singing it with nobody else. Yeah.
I would say one of the benefits to that, maybe not to veteran performers, but something that has actually just jogged in my mind, is actually during Topsy Turvy, I felt like I learned a lot about reading music while singing, because I didn't have the pressure of, okay, I'm in the rehearsal room, I need to do it now. I had it like on my own. I was there, I had to figure it out for myself. But that being said, that might work. That works for me. I do not think I'm in the majority there at all. And that whole thing you were saying about like missing the magic of things, I completely agree. Just today we did some filming for Shakespeare's upcoming show Measure for Measure, and it was great. I loved it. Big shout out as per every week to Theo Dudridge and the director Meadow Capon, who, you're incredible. You're incredible, both of you. I know Meadow's
love
listening.
you guys.
But honestly, the fun of rehearsing in person is just next to nothing else. So, news this week. I want to highlight this because I think it's incredible. Bo Burnham, the comedian, has released his comedy special called Inside. If you don't know him, Bo Burnham is a massive kind of YouTube sensation turned comedian turned actor turned director, who has basically spent the last year creating something in lockdown which deals with the themes of how people can stay, like how and why to stay creative during lockdown, but also how scary it is to go back out into the real world. And using that, I think I want to talk to you both about kind of whether you think things, now that things are opening up again and larger venues are starting, cinemas are opening up and theatres and sports events and clubs and everything, do you think it is going to be like everyone flocks back, or do you think it's going to be more of a gradual kind of what's going to happen, kind of a more tentative return to normality?
I think with live music, and particularly musical theatre, I think it will be a case of flocking back. I think obviously there'll be a lot of people who are anxious and concerned about going back, and I think very justifiably so. But I think the performing arts has been very particularly suffered, has particularly suffered this during this pandemic, in a way that I think a lot of other industries
absolutely
have been able to try and get around, that performing arts have struggled to, particularly obviously live theatre and live concerts, because you can't it's not the same watching a live stream as it is going in person, and no matter how good quality the live stream is, it will never be the same, and that obviously means that they're not able to charge as much, not able to sustain it, etc.
I mean, I know personally that, I'm very keen to go back and see live theatres again, because like you said, it's just such a unique experience which I think so many people have missed so sorely. But I definitely will be cautious about it, because definitely when we went to see Pirates, as much as I enjoyed the show, in terms of being in the actual theatre, I didn't feel particularly safe, because there wasn't much social distancing and a lot of people were not wearing masks. So I was genuinely quite concerned, especially because I was actually performing in a live show. I was working on Ruckus's production of Romeo and Juliet at that point, so obviously I wanted to be extra careful that I didn't catch the disease. But yeah, definitely, hopefully that might improve now, because, it's been longer since then, and obviously we've had much more vaccinations since then. So yeah, I think hopefully that I have the feeling more people will be eager to get back to it, but like you said, Matteo, there'll definitely be people erring on the side of caution as well, which is also completely understandable.
And like it'll definitely take some adjusting. I think it'll also just be for performers, and even to be fair for even theatre goers, really emotional the first time you're back. I've been very fortunate, obviously, with Amelio being able to rehearse in person with Ruckus. And also the university, I'm doing some stuff with the orchestra where they're able to do some things in person. I remember the first time being in those rehearsal spaces with everyone, obviously still social distancing, obviously when we're not playing in masks and things, but it was a bit of a moment of like, right, we're actually getting somewhere now, and I think it's just going to be quite emotional for people when they come back.
I think you're absolutely right, but you know what, it doesn't look like it's that much further away when you think about the fact that we have now been in this pandemic for a year and a half. Doesn't look. It looks like we can see that bright little light at the end of the tunnel, and honestly, couldn't be more excited. On that note, I think that we are going to end it there. Also, fun little fact to everyone listening at home. We've actually recorded this podcast. This is the second time round we've recorded it. There was, to my surprise, vastly different topics talked this time. But also, it's been a great time. You guys won't get to see the other one, because we forgot to press record. So that's okay. So yeah, we've recorded this twice. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. The second time round we've done it. But I need to close this off, and so I have to ask you both what your favourite Shakespeare plays are.
I'm certainly no Shakespeare expert, but I feel like I'd have to mention Romeo and Juliet because I'm a huge sucker for West Side Story. It is my favourite musical of all time. And also after being in the play, I think it is genuinely a beautifully written show, and particularly West Side Story, the way it uses that story as well. I think I'd also mention Much Ado About Nothing. I think my favourite comedy of his, because it's just brilliant, and Beatrice and Benedict are just legends. So,
I think I will also stake my hand up and say that I am no Shakespeare person at all, and my only experience to Shakespeare was at school studying Macbeth and briefly Romeo and Juliet, and so I'm really no Shakespeare person at all. I'd probably have to also say Romeo and Juliet for the only reason that I also love West Side Story, and I feel like that is the closest that I've come to Shakespeare, really.
If none of the rest of you could tell, I've got two musical theatre kids on today.
Yeah.
I was about to say
what was meant to be a music-oriented podcast, and it ended up us talking honestly more about kind of story structure and stuff like that, which is super.
Plus Hamilton.
And Hamilton, yes, which is super cool. I think expectation being the theme. Let's put expectation by the wayside, and just look forward to whatever is coming our way, I think. So, thank you all for joining me this week for Bard Times. This has been Jack Hardman with my lovely friends Matteo and Reuben, and in the words of the Bard himself, talking about expectations once again. We know what we are, but not what we may be.